Trump has a genius plan to rig next election, and liberals can't stop it. By Cat Stevens for DailyVine.com. According to Mother Jones, President Trump is planning to rig the 2020 election, just like the rigged 2016 election, with the help of Russians, of course. In a piece titled Hidden Figures, How Donald Trump is Rigging the Census, they theorize that the president is going to wield his presidential power to rig the election and other political issues in his favor. The only problem with their logic is that they believe he's going to rig a census to win the election, when the census results won't go into effect until after the election is over. Mother Jones starts the piece with some very heart-wrenching narrative about how the workers assigned to get a handle on those in low visibility housing were mistaken for ICE, and how depressing the conditions are to those illegals who live in poverty. Quezada and Jan Juan were working with the Central Valley Immigrant Integration Collaborative, a network of organizations embarking on a pilot program to identify low visibility housing in Fresno in preparation for the 2020 census. That's why Quezada and San Juan were in Fresno, where 70% of the residents are people of color, 20% are immigrants, and 1/3 live in poverty, making it one of the hardest places in the country to count. Only 73% of residents in the East Fresno neighborhood they were canvassing mailed back their census forms in 2010, if they ever received them in the first place. They go on to explain how the census, which takes place in the same year as the upcoming presidential election, is something that will dictate how the government budget is allocated. It will also potentially redraw the congressional districts, and that, as we well know, can rearrange the political landscape in Washington. The fear among the left seems to be that illegals won't get a fair shake when it comes to government funding and a voice in Washington. To that, conservatives say it's about time. However, Mother Jones goes on to explain, but with the Trump administration in charge, voting rights advocates fear the undercount could be amplified, shifting economic resources and political power towards rural, white, and Republican communities. The census is scheduled to begin on April 1st, 2020, in the middle of the presidential election season. Of all the ways democracy is threatened under President Donald Trump, a blind eye to Russian meddling in elections, a rollback of voting rights, a disregard for checks and balances, an unfair and inaccurate census could have the most dramatic long-term impact. It's one of those issues that's often the least sexy, least discussed in certain corners, and yet the ramifications for communities of color and vulnerable communities are so high in terms of what's at stake for economic power and political power, says Vanita Gupta, who led the Justice Department Civil Rights Division under President Barack Obama, and now directs the Leadership Conference on Civil and Human Rights. A perfect storm is threatening the 2020 census, says Terry Ann Lowenthal, a former staff director for the House Subcommittee on Census and Population. Budget cuts enacted by the Trump administration and the Republican Congress forced the Bureau to cancel crucial field tests in 2017 and 2018. The Bureau's director resigned last June, and the administration has yet to name a full-time director or deputy director. The next census will also be the first to rely on the internet. The Census Bureau will mail households a postcard with instructions on how to fill out the form online. If they don't respond, it will send field workers known as enumerators to knock on their doors, but in an effort to save money, there will be 200,000 fewer enumerators than in 2010, increasing the likelihood that households without reliable internet access will go uncounted. Enumerators will carry tablets instead of paper forms, and the reliance on technology raises cybersecurity fears in the wake of high-profile hacks and foreign election interference. They are putting together the census under a pall of uncertainty, said Kenneth Pruitt, who directed the 2000 census. How much money? Who's going to be in charge? What are we going to do on the core questionnaire itself? To do that under such a level of uncertainty is literally unprecedented. And then on Monday night, the Trump administration dropped the biggest bombshell of all. The Commerce Department, which oversees the Census Bureau, announced that it would include a question about U.S. citizenship on the census for the first time since 1950. Civil rights groups say the move will cause immigrants, particularly undocumented ones, to avoid responding to the census for fear of being reported to immigration authorities. The result will be a massive undercount of the Latino population, leading to reduced political power and federal resources for places like Fresno. The state of California, which has the country's largest immigrant population, quickly filed a lawsuit against the administration over the question. The left is concerned that the census will not only allow the government to enforce the laws already in place, but they're also afraid that if the proper amount of illegal voices aren't heard, they might not get a say in what happens in government. They also fear that if the high-density areas don't keep their numbers up, like the one being filmed in the video above, the heartland might get a more significant say in who is elected president in 2014. Let's just see what they have over here.
Counting everyone in the country is hard. We're here in New York's 12th Congressional District, one of the hardest places in the country to count accurately. Now, I know it sounds boring and wonky, but the census is the most important civic event in America every 10 years. And preparations for it are starting right now. But with Donald Trump in charge of the 2020 census, there are already big problems. And that should worry you a lot.
Well, if you're talking about it, yeah, we're worried, all right. Yeah, let me know what you guys think in the comments below. And again, thank you so much for watching.